Bloody Fang. The swordsmith longed to create a perfect sword. A sword that would tear through a limb with one slash and impale organs with a single thrust. A sword that would make its victims suffer right up to their dying breath. In search of the cruelest of agonies, the swordsmith worked night and day. After months of toil, it was complete. A sword that would deal unending pain to its victims. All that remained was to test its abilities. The swordsmith took the weapon to his king and told him that even the most courageous man would tell its wielder anything he wanted to know. When the king tested his claim, he found the swordsmith's words to be true. Prisoners divulged their secrets without hesitation. Elated with the sword, the king demanded to know how it was forged, but the swordsmith refused to reveal his methods, fearing his masterpiece would be copied. As a result, he got to experience his work firsthand. He shed tears of joy at the quality of his creation. Calf-Carver. There once was an extremely valiant and intelligent general. Tales of his bravery sped far and wide, and the streets echoed with his name. The king felt threatened by his general's popularity. He arrested the general without reason and threw him into a dungeon deep inside the castle. The dungeon was known to drive its captive insane within 3 days. 3 years later, the king visited the dungeon. There he saw the general, both of his legs rotted away, glaring back at him with unchanged intensity. The general's stare enraged the king, and, wondering why he hadn't done so 3 years before, he drew his sword and prepared to deal the finishing blow. Just before the point of the king's sword could pierce the general's heart, he produced a sword from the pile of rags behind him and stabbed the tyrant, killing him instantly. He had fashioned the sword from the bones of his own legs, which he had amputated for the purpose. The general went on to become a noble and just king. Evil's bronze blade. In ancient times, there was a realm ruled under magic. The realm performed a ceremony each year to restore the magical protection. There, a shrine maiden would dance with this bronze blade. The bronze blade glowed with more radiance each year. A haunting purple light emanated from it whenever the shrine maiden danced. Strangely, the maiden's beauty did not fade with years, but rather it intensified with age. The princess of the realm wondered if the bronze blade was the secret of the shrine maiden's preservation. In a fit of jealousy, she took the blade for herself and killed the maiden, and so the princess gained everlasting beauty. But without the maiden's magical protection, the land faded within a year, and the princess took her own life. God's sword. The man who wielded this sword used to belong to the Knights of the Seal. His rank placed him directly above the one they called Dragon Child. The knight challenged the Dragon Child to a duel, scheming to halt the young knight's stratospheric rise through the ranks and earn himself a reputation in the bargain. However, the Dragon Child easily defeated the knight. Humiliated, he trained night and day and won promotion to platoon commander. While he was on duty with his platoon, a traitor known as the One-Eyed Man attacked them and massacred half of their numbers without breaking a sweat. Terrified, the knight fled from the battle, abandoning his friends to their fate. He could never return to the order after deserting them in their time of need. Stripped of his rank and having even lost his sword, he wandered into the wilderness and was never seen again. Injustice. Generations of heroes carried the sword as the symbol of freedom. To carry the sword and to win acclaim as heroes, they had to shed much blood. With this sword in hand, the heroes invaded foreign lands in the name of freedom. Their soldiers looted the lands, and many innocent people died. The sword was later stolen by a bandit and sold to a warmongering general. Subsequently, he too invaded neighboring kingdoms in the name of freedom. His soldiers looted the lands, and many innocent people died. After each war, the sword changed hands. To this day, no one could find a hero wielding it in the name of freedom. Moonfire. The sword made of marble emits a fierce chill and quietly awaits its owner. The legend told that the marble sword could freeze even its owner's age. It continues to wait patiently. The marble sword continued to wait. So long it waited, long enough to freeze time. The sword had waited for so long that surely even the warmth of human blood could not awaken it now. The only thing what could be said for sure is that the frozen face of its wielder would be reflected in its blade. Moonlit Beauty. Once upon a time, there lived a pedigreed gentleman whose excellence with the sword had won him as many duels as his handsome face had the hearts of the young ladies. One night, during an evening walk, he came upon the most beautiful woman he had ever seen, standing in the moonlight beside a lake. Lost in her beauty, he stood there entranced, and time seemed to him to stand still. Then, suddenly, the woman let out a gasp and cried, "Why?" Her beautiful bosom was stained red with blood. Following her horrified gaze, the gentleman saw that his own sword was buried to the hilt in her chest. The lake reflected the gentleman's smiling face. In his ears, he heard the echoes of his own voice whisper, "Now there is no one fairer than you in this world." The next day, the gentleman's body was found next to the lake. He had pierced his own heart with his sword. Nobuyoshi. In an eastern land, a poet who made his living singing songs grew wary of his trade when he realized he'd reached the limits of his talents. While contemplating what else he might do with his life, he saw a beautiful sword in the window of a pawn shop. Enchanted by its crimson blade, he bought the sword and took it home. That night he slept with the sword by his side. As he began to dream, an imp appeared and demanded a trade. He said that if the poet gave up his name, the imp would give him talent in return. The poet gave his name to the imp without a second thought. In return, he received a beautiful body and an exquisite talent for songs overnight. But without a name, the beautiful poet lost more and more of his humanity as the days went by. One fateful morning, he awoke to find that he'd been turned into an imp. Fearing to be seen in the world of men, he fled and was never seen again. He left behind the beautiful sword, now granted a name. Sealblade, Calamitous verse. A master blacksmith, embittered by the gods' maltreatment of the world, vowed to forge a weapon with which to destroy them. So, the power of the seal negated the power of the gods, and the seal derived its power from the goddess. And this master blacksmith sealed the power of the goddess into some kind of weapon? A trainee blacksmith heard these rumors and decided he could make a tidy profit if he made a weapon like the one in the legends. After many months of hard work, the blacksmith finally completed the weapon, but no one knows what became of him after that. Some said he had been attacked by a thief who desired the sword. Others said it was the curse of the goddess. But no one knew for sure. Silver Butterfly. A lady was married off at a young age to a count in a nearby land. She was blessed with a kind husband and servants, but her life was a bore. She confided her malcontent to her husband, who suggested that she go on a journey. There were many things she needed to learn as countess, he said. She appreciated her husband's understanding. She heard many riveting tales from other travelers. There were stories of farmers whose lives changed with the seasons, of children surviving without their parents, of the betrayal and treachery of kings in foreign lands. After 2 eventful years on the road, the Countess began the voyage home as she had promised. When she returned, the Countess found her husband confused and weak. The mansion was in ruins, deserted apart from her husband and his favorite servant. Suddenly, she realized that her journey had been the servant's idea, a part of his scheme to take over the estate. But surely a loving wife would notice such a plot, he smirked. The servant was arrested and executed, but the Count never regained his health. He died quietly, leaving the devastated Countess to mourn. She had his body cremated, and his ashes encased in a large sword. The butterfly engraved on the blasé was based on a mask the Countess had brought as a gift for her husband during her travels. Skald's Song. In a cold land to the north, there lived 2 sisters who loved each other very much. They made their living as blacksmiths and owned a little workshop in the village. One day, they were working hard as usual when a villager ran in and told them that their mother, who had been missing since they were little, had been found. The sister's mother was trapped inside a glacier on the top of a mountain, as beautiful as the day she disappeared. The sisters tried to destroy the glacier, but none of their smithing tools could make any impression on the iron-hard glacial ice. When nothing else showed any sign of working, one of the sisters said, "Sister, what about one of our swords?" So they took their finest creation, Skald's Song, and swung it at the glacier. As the blade touched the ice, there was a mighty explosion, and the sisters found themselves in the loving arms of their long-lost mother. "How you've both grown." The mother had survived inside the glacier for all that time. The sisters cried tears of joy and talked to their mother for days on end. When they finally got up to leave, their mother made no attempt to stop them. They were, after all, smiths who commanded fire. Slaughterism. What has happened to me? Every time I wield this sword, every time I see blood pour out of my victim's neck, I'm overwhelmed with unspeakable joy. Crimson blood paints the street red. It stains my pale body scarlet. Its vivid hue is burnt into my eyes and won't leave my mind. Blood, 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 blood. The blood gushes out with a happy splash. When it's all gone, I'm sad. So I find new flesh and tear it up. It's best when it's warm, but I like it cold too. When it's dry, it's not so red, which isn't much fun, but it's still blood, so I still like it very, very much. Blood, 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 bloody, bloody, bloody blood, crimson blood, bloody red, red, crimson scarlet. Soldier's Sword. This sword was forged by a tribe using a closely guarded secret technique. In order to maintain secrecy, a daughter of the tribe was forced to kill her lover, whom the elder suspected of spying for a neighboring tribe. She committed suicide soon after. The tribe's secrecy was maintained, but it came at a high price. Paranoia gradually spread, and the tribe began to punish and torture its own. They blackmailed each other, and soon all order was lost. The torture methods were cruel. Some died of having melted iron poured into their mouths, and others simply lost their minds from the trauma of the ordeal. Then all trust was lost within the tribe. They began to murder one another, and in a matter of days, they had wiped themselves out. And so their technique remained a secret for all times, just as they had wished. Takamasa. After a lengthy war, the warrior finally captured Takamasa from his enemy, a mere fugitive. The fugitive's skills were no match for his own, but as soon as their swords crossed, the warrior's blade broke in two. Risking his life, the warrior allowed the fugitive to plunge Takamasa into his shoulder. Inching agonizingly down its blade, he advanced and stabbed his enemy to death with the broken sword. "Let him cut my flesh, and I shall break his bones." Takamasa responded well to the warrior's philosophy. Armed with the legendary blade, he became a renowned hero. One day, he was ordered to kill a demon with the strength of 100 men and a body like steel. Showing no sign of fear, the warrior approached the demon and challenged it to strike him. Laughing at this folly, it shattered his body with a single mighty punch. But even as it did so, Takamasa pierced its scaly throat, killing it instantly. "Let him break my bones, and I shall take his life." The warrior's spirit lived on inside the sword. Thief's Secret. Many years ago, there was a mighty gang of bandits who made their living by doing dirty deeds for the rich and powerful. One of the founding members was a man named Left Eye. He was a valued lieutenant who specialized in intelligence gathering and other clandestine undertakings. Left Eye did not participate in battle. No one ever saw him draw his sword. It was a magic sword that brought riches to its owner. And Left Eye was indeed affluent. Being a lieutenant with unique talents, he was paid handsomely for his work and had amassed a sizable fortune over the years. One day, some of the younger bandits surrounded Left Eye. They told him that they were unhappy about the size of his share compared to theirs. In truth, however, they were after more than just their fair share. They were after old Left Eye's fortune. Reading their intentions, Left Eye finally drew his sword. Gone was the reserved man they all knew. Standing in his place, a bandit as fearsome as the ruthless young man who had founded the gang years before. It was over in a second. Left Eye walked away from the youngsters' bodies and told his old friend that he was leaving. Though they begged him to stay, he disappeared into the desert. Union. In his instructions to the royal swordsmith, the king demanded that his new sword should combine the fang of a behemoth, the beak of a griffin, the talon of a dragon, and iron from the eastern lands. Though he knew the task would be long and arduous, the faithful smith vowed to make the weapon and set out to find the materials right away. Clearly, the smith needed help, but no traveling companion could be found. Nor was it any surprise that no one rose up to the challenge. It was because the kingdom was weak that the king had searched the library to find a sword powerful enough to protect his subjects. This was no mere whim. The smith knew he had to find a way. So the swordsmith traveled alone, but 2 months passed without any progress. Navigating the monster-infested wilderness was proving to be difficult, and he was close to despair. It was then that a hero of the time happened to pass by, and after listening to the smith's tale, he agreed to lend a much-needed hand. The two fought on together. After countless adventures, the faithful smith forged the king's sword. Sadly, it did not possess as much power as the king had hoped, but he was still elated with it. Using the power of the sword, the king kept the monsters at bay and continued to rule the land. The smith was duly knighted and served his king for many happy years. Nowe's longsword. A gift from the previous general, Nowe received the sword on the day he joined the knights as a trainee. Since taking him in from the wild, General Auror had been Nowe's human father, teaching him the ways of men. Auror was a strong and generous man, whose skills with the sword was without equal. He was Nowe's hero. Mocked by some as a wild beast, Nowe dreamed of one day becoming as strong and generous a human being as his adoptive father. Cherishing that dream, he trained every day with his sword and lived the life of a knight. During Nowe's first battle, Auror saved his life. The cruel reality of war, all noise and blood and death, was too much for the young Nowe to take in. He stood transfixed, frozen with fear. Seeing this, Auror rushed to his son's side and commanded Nowe to listen carefully to his words.
The sword takes life, but it also saves the lives of your friends. What matters is the will of the one who wields the sword.
So, would Nowe use this sword to take life or save it? Neither the sword nor Auror could answer that question. Inuart's longsword. In solitary confinement somewhere in the desert, a man was tied to a stake. He had fought to protect the one he loved, but lacked the strength to save her, and stood on the brink of despair. He could remember her smile, but her smiles were directed at her brother. Drifting in and out of consciousness, he was about to accept his fate when a girl appeared before him. Her eyes were a deep crimson and glistened like rubies. She smiled like the pretty little girl that she was, but spoke in a strange voice. It was the voice of neither a child nor an adult.
If only I had the strength.
Her crimson eyes peered into the weak man's mind. He became the girl's servant. Beyond that, he could not remember. The only thing he could remember is his beloved killing herself in front of him. Then, standing before the seeds of destruction. 18 years later. The man's longsword now belonged to a boy raised by a dragon. The sword was used to fight his lover's brother, the one-eyed man. Standing beside the boy was the girl with crimson eyes, now a grown woman. Their tale of life, death, and tangled relations was told for generations. Caim's sword. 18 years ago, when the world faced destruction, a human and a dragon dared to fight the gods. In the end, the dragon gave her life to save the world. Left behind, the man wandered the desolate lands, his heart full of sorrow. Accompanying him on his journey was the very same girl who brought mankind to the brink of extinction. Betraying the alliance he'd formed during the war, the old hierarch altered the seal to increase the dragon's burden. When the wandering man felt the dragon's agony, the girl sensed his distress and made her escape. Alone again, his mind was consumed by thoughts of vengeance, and his hollow soul burned with bloodlust once more. Caim hunted down the treacherous hierarch. Ignoring his pleas for mercy, he killed him with a single blow. However, Caim's efforts were in vain. The seal was permanently altered. The burden was tearing the dragon's mind apart, so the world's former savior faced a similar choice. But this time, Caim would choose the dragon over the world. Caim and Angelus were finally reunited when all the keys to the seal had been broken. Once more, the world faced destruction, but at least they were together, complete. They vowed then never to part again, a vow they kept until the end. After that, only Caim's sword remained in the doomed world.